Hi everyone. So welcome again to the content video for Module 4 in KIN 2050 Applied Health and Wellbeing, and this is on creating a behavior management program. And again, I want to just reiterate what I just said. We're going through steps, and it's all dynamic, and so it's going to be changing. And if it changes for you, just go with the changes, because I really want you to get what it feels like to work through the process. And sometimes it's appropriate to change the process. And again, I also want you to get used to what it would be like to help somebody else through the process. And so again, we started with what are the dimensions of wellness? What are kind of the sub areas of dimensions of wellness? Where are you strong? What things would you like to work on? Getting to identifying very specific behaviors, and then identifying behaviors that you would actually like to work on, and then writing reasons why. Right? Because those are the reasons that are going to keep us motivated. So again, every step along the process is super helpful, because if you just jump to a behavior change program without all the intermediate steps, it's likely that it's not going to be very successful. And there's nothing worse than starting something that you're not going to be successful for in the long run. So all these steps are really important. So I want you to kind of keep your mind on two things. One, that it's a dynamic process. We're going step by step by step. Next week, you're actually going to have a finalized behavior change program with a contract that you're going to turn in. We're not there yet. We're not going to get there this week, but we're going to have a pretty good rough draft this week. So again, that's where we're going with all this. We talked about the stages of change, and you did a couple different readings. I talked about it last time. One of the reasons why I gave you the extra reading in that this time is because I want you to understand that every source is a little bit different. We do have pretty accepted stages of change, but every source is a little different in the way that they talk about them, or if there's an extra step in there or not. So again, pre-contemplation, we are not really thinking about it. We're feeling powerless. Contemplation is now, okay, we're thinking about it. We're starting to think about planning, but we're not quite planning yet. But we really need to figure out why it's important to us. And we figure out a plan of implementation. That's where we are right now. We're going to go through a step-by-step process to really figure out a plan of implementation. Then again, we take action, we figure out how to incorporate it and maintain it, and then really incorporate it into our life when there's ups and downs, and when we accidentally quit and we lapse, and weave it into the behavior of our everyday life. So those are kind of all the stages that we're going to be working through. And again, today we're really focusing on the area of plan of implementation. What I'd like you to do, again, if you haven't yet, I want you to make sure that you have the behavior management plan worksheet and get that out, because we're going to be working that. I'm going to talk you through that as we go. And I also want you to understand that right now I don't want you writing in that, because I'm going to ask you to take a lot of notes through the week, and then synthesize your notes and summarize your notes, and your notes are going to be summarized on this sheet and then turned in. So it's really important right now that you don't write over it, because every step on this sheet is going to be a pretty in-depth process where you're going to have a lot of writing, and I just want to see the summary. You're just going to turn in the summary. So what's the very first, what are the steps we're talking about? Step 1, you need to monitor and record what your behavior is now, because that's going to give you a lot of ideas about what you need to do to change. Okay, so you're going to spend a couple days just kind of monitoring what, if you're one of your behavior change hopes is to change your diet. What does it look like now? What are the pitfalls now? When do you have trouble with maintaining your diet, or snacking when you shouldn't, or emotional eating, or whatever it is? We want to kind of see what the behavior is now, so we need to know what we need to do to change it. Step 2, we want to analyze and identify, okay, so what's working, what's not working, how am I going to be able to look at kind of how a different kind of structure is going to work for me. And again, we're going to walk through all these parts. Then you need to gather information. You're not only gathering information about what's working for you already or not working for you already in terms of that behavior, but you also want to gather outside information. What do the experts say? If you want to lose weight, you need to be a little bit more specific. What are the experts saying about the best way to go about that? What is the best way that the experts say for an individual person? It may not be for you. You may need to think of a different way because there's no universal way to really go about a behavior change. So it's really important to just gather information about how you do it, And then you need to set goals, and we're going to talk a lot about goals because they need to be very specific. You know, I had a lot of people say, okay, I just want to eat better. Well, that we need to figure out, that's a really good starting point. But from that, you need to have a really specific goal. Even I had somebody saying, I want to eat more vegetables. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean you're going to eat broccoli and carrots and cauliflower 3 times a week, a cup each time? That's a little bit more specific than I just want to eat more vegetables. So we need to be really specific about our goals. They need to be measurable. We want to know if we're actually doing this. So they need to be measurable goals. They need to be achievable. Some people just say, oh yeah, I want to do this, and it's not really achievable. So if you're going to set yourself up for this, you need to be able to set yourself up for success. And one of the things of setting yourself up for success is making sure that the goals are achievable. Are they realistic? Sometimes people use the R and the SMART for relevant, but I'll use it both. Are they realistic and relevant? Is it important to you? And is it time appropriate? Every once in a while I get like spam on my text messages. I don't know how I got this, but somebody got my text message phone number from something, and I get all these spam, lose 30 pounds in 1 week. Sorry, that's not time appropriate. That's not realistic. And it's spam anyway, but it just cracks me up that somebody would believe that that's a healthy thing to do. So whatever goal you're setting, it needs to be a time appropriate goal. And so then we're going to talk about those. And so you're going to kind of really look at, okay, so what are my real goals in this? And we're going to go through each of those pieces. Then from there, you begin to plan your action. Part of planning your action is identifying kind of chains of behavior that usually knock you off balance. Right? And you're going to gather a little bit when you monitor what you're doing. You're going to probably pick up some of those. And then on planning your action, you're actually going to look at those and say, okay, so this is where I usually had trouble. And this might be a different kind of chain of behavior that I could stop that. And I'm going to explain these a lot more as we go. And then making contacts. It's a really good idea. We see that people are more successful in behavior change if you're making contacts with other people that are either already entrenched in that behavior or doing that same behavior change. A lot of the apps, it's really cool. You might have a weight loss app, and it'll connect you to a community of people that are doing that same app. Or right now at Cal Poly, there's a step challenge. How many, kind of challenging anybody that wants to engage in that, of how many steps they take a day. So it's really helpful. It's not necessary, but it's super helpful if you can make contacts of people that are going to actually help you maintain this behavior. It might be an expert in the area, it might be like a personal trainer thing, or it might be, just doing it with somebody. Every time I used to run a marathon, I was always trying to talk somebody into doing it with me. And I always did. And because that always made the energy a lot more sustainable to go through all the training. So, and so these are all the plan of action. And again, we're going to break these down as we talk about each of them. So step one, monitor and record. What does that mean? And again, I'd like you to look at the worksheet right now. I don't want you to fill it in. What I want you to do is either keep a separate journal. It really helps in behavior change or behavior enhancement if you kind of have a whole dedicated journal, not a regular journal, not something that you would write in other things as well, just one specific dedicated journal, which can just be a pad of paper. It doesn't have to be a fancy journal, but some kind of dedicated pad of paper where you're actually going to keep notes. And it might be digital. It might be just a dedicated folder on your computer, and that's totally fine too. So again, right now, I don't want you writing on the worksheet, but I just kind of want to go over pieces of it and then kind of how you're going to bring it back. So monitor and record, what does that mean? It means, like, let's say, I'm using this one a lot, but I saw a lot of people having hopes to do behavior change in this area, and it's just an easy example too. So maybe your behavior change is to lose weight. And again, that's really broad right now, so we need to bring it down. But before we really start talking about what that goal is, what are your issues now? So let's just monitor what you're doing. Well, so just monitor what the circumstances around your eating habits are right now. Without judgment, just monitor them. Wow, I was watching TV and I went through a whole box of crackers, not even realizing that I was eating. Or I got really stressed out working on my online assignment, and so I went to the refrigerator instead and just, got everything out of the refrigerator. Or it's late at night and, I really just was going to let the dog out and ended up going to the refrigerator and eating a whole carton of ice cream or what, I don't know, whatever it is. And what you do is you just want to monitor what's going on right now, because monitoring what's going on right now really kind of helps you see then where you can make change. So monitor and record. So what I want you to do is for at least 2 days, maybe 3. Usually it's more helpful to do it for a week or 2, but we just don't have time. But at least 2 or 3 days, I want you to monitor your behavior around the behavior goal that you want to set. And again, just monitor how it is now. It's not about right and wrong. It's not about judging. It's also not about already trying to implement the behavior. We want to look at what it looks like when you're just not even thinking about it. It could be, it doesn't have to be a physical goal. It could be that you want to increase your communication. Okay, so now instead of working on a physical dimension, you want to work on a, social dimension. And my communication with my parents is horrible. So monitor what happens every time that there's kind of an issue, or when you have a conversation, or when the conversation goes bad, and kind of what happens and what gets triggered, and how you all behave in that, without value judgment, nothing like that. You're just kind of recording it so you can go back and look at it later. So the monitor and record, you're going to again, it's just taking a bunch of notes. And that's why I don't want you to do it right here. I just want you to do it on a separate piece of paper, and you're just taking a bunch of notes. And then what you're going to do is, after the 2 or 3 days, I want you to take all those notes, and then I want you to summarize what you found. And so summarizing what you found goes under that monitor and record step 1. Okay, so then analyze and identify. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take all that information from all those pages of notes that you have, and you're going to analyze what kind of worked and what didn't work. Well, if I was, eating emotional eating, that's probably, maybe I pick up that I've been emotionally eating. Wow, I did it then, I did it then, I did it then, I did it then. Wow, I didn't even realize how much emotional eating I was doing. So maybe that's kind of something that I need to identify that's an issue. Or just mindless eating when I'm watching television. Or, it was my intent to go exercise every day, but then I just get distracted. And so I end up doing something else. And, that's one of my problems I'll talk about later. If I sit down to the computer before I go out and run, most of the time I get so caught up on trying to get email done or stuff like that that I just don't. And running is super, as I've said before, super, super important to me. So I know that I can't sit down before I go run. I know I have to get that time in for myself before I start into work, because if I sit down to work and then I say, oh, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, it probably isn't going to get done. So it's really important for me to analyze those behaviors in myself, because it's going to come important later when I start kind of making a plan. Again, emotional or social things, communication. Wow, I realize that if I'm really tired, I'm way more triggered and I tend to talk back more. And so I know that I need to be grounded before I have a conversation with somebody. Or, so again, you just want to take all this. It's like the monitor and record is kind of like all the raw data. And I want you to take a lot. And again, this is all for you. I don't even look at that part. I do kind of look at your summary, but I don't even look at that part. So I just want you to take a lot of raw data, and I want you to look at that and go, okay, so this is kind of what's going on this time, and this is kind of what's going on this time, and this is where I might need to work a little bit on that behavior. Okay, so gather information. You need to have information. Okay, because you can't really start a behavior enhancement program or behavior management or behavior change or whatever you want to call it if you don't have the information about what is really going to work. And some of us know some information, but it's always good to get more. And so what I want you to do is I want you to find 3 sources I'm sure that most people are going to do an internet search, and that's totally fine, but I want you to find 3 sources that look like reputable sources. What we're going to go into after we do the behavior change program is we're going to go into misinformation, and there is a billion-dollar industry of misinformation in health and wellness. So I want you to kind of really do a really good search for what for you looks like really reputable information leading you through or helping you through a behavior that you would like to change, enhance, manage. Okay, so I want you give me the URL and just give me a summary of what that information is. Now, you are going to have a ton of classes that want scholarly research articles and, all that this isn't that. What I want you to do is find really useful information that's going to help you through that target behavior. So maybe your emotional health is not so good, and there's an app called Happify, really cool, and it really just kind of targets certain areas of your emotional health. Well, that's gathering information. What does that app do? How does it lead you through? There's a website that goes along with that. So it's a really good gathering information. It's a really reputable website. It's the whole app is figured out by a lot of different scientists, but again, it's targeted at really helping you do that behavior, not necessarily a scholarly article that's critiquing it. So I want you to do your best. And again, this class is ever evolving. So as we go through the class, you're going to realize kind of the difference between misinformation and good information. So do your best to discern that right now and understand that you might not. Okay, that's okay. But I want you to do your best to really discern information that's really going to help you change that behavior. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a scholarly article, but I want you to do something that really is kind of helping you through. So you're going to find at least 3 sources. You're going to write several paragraphs synthesizing what you learned on that source. And then kind of what would work for you out of that, right? What are you gathering out of that? And so again, let's go back to that the worksheet on the gather information. I don't want all the stuff that you're writing. I want you to synthesize. I want you to give me the URL and kind of synthesize what you learned and how that's really going to help you in your own target behavior. So again, on all these other things, you're going to take some more notes, but I just want to see the summary and the synthesis of the information. Okay, so set goals. You want to just kind of really set your goal. And again, it needs to be super specific. Eating more vegetables isn't going to work. Eating better isn't going to work. Losing weight isn't going to work. All those things are great behaviors, but I want to know if it's lose weight, I want to lose 10 pounds by November 30th. Or I want to make sure that I'm eating, 3 cups of vegetables every day, and these are the vegetables I'm going to pick from. Drink more water. I want to make sure that I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water a day, and space it throughout the day. And I'm going to measure it. I'm going to keep a container here, and it's going to have all the water that I need for the day, and I'm going to pour out of that. Right? So I hope you're getting this, right? It has to be really specific. A goal for communication, right? When I come home, and it usually gets triggered between my mom and I want to be able to stop and pause and speak my needs from a grounded space without making her wrong, right? Those are pretty specific goals. How are you going to measure it? It might be measuring the times that you don't get triggered. It might be measuring how often you were able to calm yourself, or how often you were able to retrain. And again, you would just be marking this down, right? So you need to write very, very, very specific goals. They need to be measurable. You need to know if you're really actually doing the things that you said you're going to be doing. Okay, your goal might be, because again, these don't have to be physical goals. They might be around your social health. How is it measurable? Well, I had, 4 really good conversations with somebody this week. The specificity of that might be that I need to reach out to my friends more, and so I want to make contact, with 3 different friends 3 times a week, and something more than just a random Instagram. Okay, and then so you could actually measure that out. Is it achievable? How is it achievable? I want you to just kind of document how it is achievable, how you would do this. Is it realistic? Running a marathon by next month probably isn't realistic unless you're already running a lot, right? So is it realistic? Is it relevant? I know that's not on there, but that's often used as kind of the interchangeable R word. Because if it's not really relevant to your life, you're not gonna keep with it. And is it time appropriate, right? Is it appropriate that you do it at this time? And is the timeline that you're giving yourself appropriate? They're both are true, right? They're both different ways of looking at the time, but is it time appropriate? Is it appropriate to try to do that right now? Some might not be. You might need to pick another behavior. But again, the timeline that you allow for yourself, like, okay, so I want to run a marathon. It's not going to happen in a month, but it might happen in 5 months. So, let's try to figure out what a time appropriate goal is. So on your on your worksheet, again, this is just the summary of it. So on the worksheet, what I want you to do is I want you to write out kind of your goal, and then I want you to kind of break these down. Tell me the specifics of it, exactly, because what it's gonna do is kind of force you through a certain thought process. If we're not kind of forced to think about it in a certain way, we don't. And so what is it? How are you going to really specifically tell me what you're doing? Like, again, the example of the vegetables, instead of I'm going to eat more, it's like, okay, I'm going to eat this, I'm going to eat this much, I'm going to pick from these, I'm going to eat them with this meal, right? That's going to kind of, a lot of these are going to overlap into the other. Is it measurable? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to, losing weight? It might be just getting on the scale. Yeah, it's a measurable goal because I'm going to be getting on the scale, 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm going to be able to measure my weight loss that way. Or I'm going to be able to measure how fast I go out and run a mile, or I'm going to be able to measure how many steps I took. Or I'm going to be able to measure how many times I didn't get triggered in a conversation with somebody in my family. or I'm going to be able to measure, you know, whatever it is. So I want you to kind of break those down and then just write a few sentences. And then I want you to do is plan your action. So I want you to create a detailed and specific plan. Now, again, like I said, this is kind of the good rough draft. Next week, we're going to really talk about, really kind of spelling this out in a more specific way. But if you do a good job this week, next week's going to be a piece of cake. So I want you to create a pretty specific, detailed plan, because the more detailed the plan is, the more likely you're going to be able to pull it off. Okay, so I want you to really create a specific and detailed plan. And again, when you gather information, the other sources that you get are going to be able to tell you a lot of how to do this, how to create that plan, even if it's like in communication, right? If you look up at some sources on, effective communication, you're going to figure out ways to be able to measure that and create a detailed plan to be able to carry it out. And a lot of these things, I got to say, a lot of these things are topics that we're going through this semester. We just haven't got there. So right now, and that's what I mean by it's a dynamic process, because you may think something about communication now, and that might be a goal of yours. I want to learn how. I'm stuck with my family now. I need to learn how to be able to communicate better with them because we're fighting all the time. Well, probably in I don't know how far down the line, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to really get some pretty deep into communication. So your behavior change plan may change at that point, because you might want to incorporate more of the things that we're talking about in class. So that's why I say this is kind of a really changing process. We're going to talk about health and nutrition. We're going to talk about fitness. We're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about all of the sexual health. We're going to talk about all of these different things as we go along. So I don't know, I'm going to bring this up, but it's good time, because we are going to talk about sexual health as one of the topics that we actually discuss in class. So what might be a behavior change around that? Well, I actually am sexually active and haven't been using any kind of contraceptive. So that is kind of an issue. So what is my plan? My plan is that every time I'm going to use contraceptives, how do I measure it? I'm going to actually measure the times that I do and measure the times that I don't, right? I mean, you can get into really different real specific patterns on whatever that behavior change is. So I want you to think outside of the box. I'm using a lot of examples of physical change, but it doesn't have to be. And so it's going to take some thought about how you might be able to kind of mold this all into what it is that you really want to change. So then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to identify potential chains of pitfalls and chains of success. And I'm going to explain what that means in just a minute. And then you need to plan some kind of evaluation. This kind of goes back to the measurement thing, but it's a little bit more formal of, okay, I did measure it, but now let's kind of evaluate how much I really did it and how much I didn't do it and what I need to change to be able to be better about implementing it, right? So somehow you need to be figuring out how you're going to evaluate that. What would that look like? Again, it might be times you get triggered and times that you don't get triggered. It might be planning the evaluation, and then why, and then what can you do to be able to not have that happen again? Plan evaluation. Well, I did really good on my diet 6 days a week, but the 7th day I didn't do so well. Well, maybe that's okay, because some diets say that you should have a day off. Maybe that's not okay with you, right? But you're evaluating what days worked, what days didn't work, why they didn't work, and what you need to do. So it's really important to come back around and look at what's working, what's not working, why, how much, and then try to reevaluate what would make it work better. So that's all kind of in the evaluation. And again, this is all different depending on what your behavior change is. So breaking behavior chains. This is super helpful, and I hope you get what I'm trying to explain here. Because what I want you to do is I want you to, on a piece of paper, I want you to kind of write pitfalls or when I have trouble, and then how I would change that. So let me give you an example. So my chain here would be, I get up super early to make sure that I get my run in and, walking the dogs and get my meditation in and all that kind of stuff before I work. Well, I got distracted by something and I just wanted to answer one email. So I sat down to the computer and then I get distracted and I lose my time and I have a meeting. So see, those changes go, even though I sit down the first time, I think, okay, I'm just going to get up in 10 minutes. Well, I don't get up in 10 minutes. So at any point though, I should be able to get up in 10 minutes. But then I think, okay, so what's my chain here? Usually what happens then is I say, oh, you know what? I can just do it later. I'll do it at lunch. But then lunch comes around and it's like, oh God, I got a meeting at 1, but I got to eat now and it doesn't work to eat and go run. So I'll just, and I keep saying, I'm going to do it later. I'm going to do it later. So those chains of behaviors lead one into the other. And by the end of the day, I'm going nuts because I didn't get my run in and feeling really bad about it. So what could be the chains of success? Well, if I sit down, first of all, don't sit down to the computer before I get run. And then maybe so I sat down for 5 minutes. Well, what can I do to be able to make sure that I get back up? Well, just thinking about this, okay? Not planning that I'm going to go run later. Just say, okay, I'll give it 10 minutes now. I'm going to go. Instead of just saying, oh, I'll go at lunch or whatever, right? And so then, so all the way that you keep having a pitfall choice that keeps leading you down the drain, then you can have something as an intervention technique to get you back, right? Pitfall chain. I'm on a diet and I ate a cookie. Big deal. You ate a cookie. But what happens is usually people beat themselves up. So then they got to eat the whole box. And then they feel bad the next day and they think they're off their diet. So they need to eat a second box. And it's like, so what would the chain of success be? So I ate one cookie, big deal. That's not an issue, right? It's more about what I do in the long term. And so my chain of success is just to be able to break that. Or even if I did eat the whole box that day, I might wake up the next morning and say, okay, today's another day. I didn't go off my diet. I just had a temporary relapse. And how do I get myself back on it, right? So the chains of success are really kind of breaking each chain along the way that usually goes down the drain. Pitfall chain of maybe communication. Well, I came in and I was tired and hungry and I just said something rude. Well, then what happens then is somebody else reacts, and then when that other person reacts, then I react again, and then I react again, and then pretty soon we're bringing up stuff that happened 20 years ago and fighting about something that didn't even, that hasn't even happened in the last 10 years. And so it's like, how do we call that going down the drain? How do you stop at any point? Say, okay, I just need to stop this because I'm getting triggered. Can we come back and talk about it when I'm grounded, right? So at any point in time, there's a way to break that chain and to come back and put it into a chain of success. So, and it's going to be really different for any behavior that you do, and it's going to also be really, really, really different for you, right? Everybody's different. So what does that look like for you? What do the chains of pitfalls look like, and how can you break those chains at any step along the way and be able to change those up? Okay, and then the last thing is make contacts. And again, so because a group or a person, social support is huge in behavior change. It's not absolutely necessary, but what we look at people that are really successful in making change, it's usually there's some kind of social support. So again, whether it's a group of people to do it with, whether it's a person to report to, whether it's just somebody that's going to give you information, whether it's anybody that can help you through in whatever way that you need to make that. Think about that and think about setting up the structure. This is about setting up the structure for you to be able to succeed. Because the worst thing is people don't think about setting up the structure, and then they just jump in, and then they're not successful, and then they hate themselves, and it's better that they never started in the first place. So this is really about setting up the structure. So that last piece of setting up the structure is figuring out contacts. Write down several contacts and how they would be really helpful to you. Maybe it's just calling somebody up when you get upset, right? Maybe it's, your goal is to quit smoking, and instead of picking up a cigarette, you're going to pick up a friend and call that friend, and be able to have that person talk you through. So, or you want to, you've been drinking, and that's not, you don't think the amount that you have been drinking is appropriate or healthy for you. So who can you pick up and call instead of, having a drink, or whatever behavior it is that you're trying to change? What contacts can either give you good information, can inspire you along the way, or can kind of be your go-between when you feel like you're just going to kind of fall off a little bit. Okay, so what I want you to do then at the end is, we're going to go next week. You're going to actually be a really specific thing. What I want you to do this week is go through all of that stuff and really take a whole lot of notes. And then at the end of the week, you're just going to summarize and synthesize all your notes on this. And again, don't type in the document. I want you to kind of copy and paste the document, or you can just type it in the way that I had it typed in, whatever. I just had people trying to submit things that they actually typed in what I had in the computers. We can't get the computers to open it. So again, copy and paste, or do whatever you need to do. You can just rewrite it yourself, and you're going to keep it in your own Word doc, and then you're just going to submit this. So we're not quite at the point where you're really kind of doing a behavior change contract, and this is exactly what I'm going to do, but we're pretty close, right? So I want you to identify this is really building the foundation. So this is next week we're just putting the shingles on the roof. This is the foundation, the house. We've really kind of pulled it together and pulled it down and outlined it and put really specific goals. And so that's what you're doing this week. A whole lot of just real preparation, planning, getting real specific. And again, really understanding this process through the lens of doing it for yourself, but also through the lens of, how would I really walk somebody else through this? Because when you think about walking somebody else through it, then it kind of highlights, wow, okay, yeah, that's what I need to do for myself too. So it kind of, looking at it at the dual lens really helps a lot. So have a good week. Work hard on this all week long. And then you're going to submit this. It's due Wednesday night at 11:59 p.m. And have a great week.